bit about what it's like to get close to a dock and tie up and work in close quarters. Now we're gonna go a little wider than that. One of the things that they have in this video is, or not video, but presentation, is issues about how you can control your boat, and then what factors are gonna happen outside of you that will affect you and how you have to respond to them. And they're gonna have me show you some knots and then talk about basic operations and trimming your boat. And you will be having a marlin spike evening, one night, all about tying up and tying ropes and
Can't wait.
lines and all the stuff that you've got to do. But they have this section on two of the most popular knots. I happen to bring a little line. So the two popular knots that everybody uses is a sheet bend and a bowline. Sheet bend basically is to join two lines together. And when they always say two lines of different diameter, I only have one diameter, but I'll show you how it's done. But the reason for that is that when you have a tow line, which is usually a very heavy line, and you need to get it from one boat to another, you want to throw a light line to the other boat. And then they'll haul a big line using that, and then they'll untie it. But a sheet, if you're a sailor, you know what a sheet is, right? It's a line that you control the sails with. So in the old days, back on the clipper ships, the lines were only so long so that they could, you know, move the square riggers so far. But if they had to go way off of the wind, then they needed to add more line, and they had to extend the sheet. That's one of the reasons for that.
I was wondering,
But anyway,
what's the bend part?
a bend is a knot.
Okay,
Anything is a bend.
okay, great,
So
thank you.
anyhow,
What did you call it? A main spline? What was that?
what's that?
Marlin spikes.
Marlin spike.
Marlin spike seamanship is basically working with line or rope.
Yeah.
This is called a line on a boat. It's a dock line or a bolt, well,
Mhm.
that kind of things.
Can you see
But-
it?
Yeah.
Let me first go into sheet bend. Sheet bend is pretty straightforward. You have the one end of the line. And now I gotta go find the other end. Is it down there somewhere? Here's the other end. Pretend these are two different lines.
Yeah.
Okay. So you take the end of one line, you make a loop like that. Take this, you come up through the loop once around, and then you tuck it under itself
Oh.
like that.
Can you do that
And then
again?
go
I
in
just
it.
missed it. Can you just do it again?
It's a lot easier to figure it out there than watch
Yes.
that.
Yeah. That's why I figured I'd bring a piece of line. Basically, you make a bend in the line. This would probably be your heaviest line. This would be your lightest line. So you come up through the loop. Come on. This has got a mind of its own. Go around. I went the other way this time. Doesn't matter which way you go. You go back under itself, but you don't go back down the hole. Okay? And when you
Amazing.
tighten that, oh,
Nice.
here she is.
Hello.
Hey. We just
Hi.
started. We're doing.
Okay. I remember that page, okay.
So that's a sheet
Oh,
bend.
you showed it then.
Okay.
Want to do that one more time?
One more time?
Yeah,
Sure, I can do one more
absolutely.
time. Can do this
So
one
on
more time for
Parkinson.
you.
Yes, that was perfect.
I'm Jeff. I'm
Oh,
the,
right.
I don't know which
Oh,
one,
that's right.
seminar
I saw
leader.
you in the video for the Rules of the Road.
Oh, you saw me?
Yes,
Oh,
so-
okay,
so
good.
now
That's right, you weren't here on the first
And I
time.
met you at, I
At
didn't meet you,
meeting,
but I had a
yeah.
chance to say hi to you at the dinner.
Dinner, yes,
Yeah.
I remember.
So
Okay,
anyway.
So let's see.
Two lines. Pretend they're separate lines. You take this one, just make a loop in the end of the line. So you come up through this, you go around, Again, I went the opposite way this time, doesn't matter
Yeah.
which direction you go. You come underneath itself,
Yeah. Just not down in the hole again.
and don't go down in the hole.
Yeah.
The good reason for this is that this will easily come apart. So when they get the tow line or the heavier line aboard the other boat, they can just kinda, just pull it apart. And the best way to pull anything apart is when you find a loop like this, just pull back on the loop,
Wow.
just like that. I'll show you that with the bowline as well. So bowline, best thing to use the bowline for is when you have a need for a dock line and you don't have a dock line. So when you don't have a dock line that's got a spliced in loop, you need a loop on the end of the line, you put a bowline in there. What a bowline is, and you'll hear this cliche a lot, is you create a hole, pretend this is the ground, pretend this is a tree, okay? Pretend this is a rabbit.
A rabbit.
The rabbit comes out of the hole,
Yep.
goes around the tree, whoop, and goes back down the hole,
Cool.
okay?
And you got
That's
lasso.
that is a bowline, okay? Now that line will not give,
Cool.
okay?
And you can't make that, once you tie the knot, you can't make that, loop any smaller, right?
No, this doesn't slide or anything.
Okay.
This will stay this size. So if you need to get it over a piling or
If
a
you need
cleat
lasso a
or
cow.
something like that, you can do that. The other thing is that these are easy to tie if you're in the water and somebody needs to pull you out, you can tie it around yourself. And they've
Oh,
got the line,
nice.
they've got the line up on the boat, and you just tie it around yourself.
So you make is that just a loop,
Go like this,
goes around the tree,
around the tree, and the rabbit goes down the hole,
back down in the hole.
and now they can lift you out.
You're gonna be practicing all of this on the knots. We have a whole
It's
night.
just included, there's a whole
dedicated.
night, you'll get a chance to
That's so
play with the
cool.
lines and stuff, but I've
I've
seen,
seen that on YouTube, but it's much better because
And I could bring someone to that knot class, all right?
Sure.
They pay $35 for the
Yeah.
class.
Oh,
Pay
yeah.
you?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I have a friend who said, you gonna learn knots? And I said yes, and she wanted to come.
well, there's a lot of ways to learn knots. I highly recommend a lot of YouTube videos.
Yep.
YouTube videos, you'll find some people who are really easy to listen to, and you'll find people who are absolutely obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
You usually learn more from the obnoxious people. You know what I mean?
I got a question, Jeff. So let's say you're using somebody else's slip or let's say you're coming in between some pilings and the pilings are too tall for you to throw a loop around. What knot would you use there? Reach
Basically,
around the piling?
I'd reach around the piling and just take your free end, have one attached to the boat, take your free end and go back and attach it to the boat, so you just now got a big loop.
Oh, okay, so you're not attached to the boat first.
Right. I wouldn't,
You'd
I
use a
wouldn't
bow.
tie it around the piling. You want it looped on the piling so it can go up and down with the tide.
Uh-huh.
That's one of the problems with pilings. We have a big tide here, so when you tie to a piling, you'll end up with the boat hung on one of the pilings,
Right.
and that's always difficult. So it's always nice. I actually have a roller loop. It's a long line, a heavy line with these almost like bearings on it, on the rope, and you can wrap it around a piling and it'll ride up and down the piling.
Mm-hmm. Not wearing the rope.
It doesn't wear the rope, and
Nice.
it's comfortable on the piling.
it's like one of those
It's not
cyclops.
like-
Yep.
What is it?
I don't know what it's called, to be honest with you.
But it wraps around the rope?
It wraps around the piling,
Oh, okay.
so it's just a line, heavy line. I think it's 5/8.
But it's like got ball bearings on it or something that will go up and down.
It
So the
rides.
rope isn't going up and down the piling, it's rolling on something that's on the rope.
They're like donuts.
Yeah, it's like a little bracelet. with all kinds of things on it.
Oh, yeah, that's
It
true.
goes up
Like
and
a person.
down.
That's it. Anyway, so you're gonna be getting this all over again, but this is an introduction to these two knots, which are the most popular knots to use. Okay? So, what we wanna talk about is the basic operations of your boat in the water. And there's a couple of videos and which I can shut up through, which is good, gives me some time off. But it's gonna talk about steering, you know, we're gonna run a range. Everyone know what a range is? Have you used ranges before in your, so a range basically, if you wanna go for a straight line, you see a buoy over there and you see a church up on the land behind it. You just keep the buoy and the church in line and you're going in a straight line. That's a range. You're using the buoy and the church. In some harbors, you will see that they have actually ranges.
Yeah.
And the ranges are large boards with usually different colors. So it might be yellow with a black stripe. And then another one behind it, probably 300 or 400 feet behind it, higher, with a yellow and a black stripe. And you go, what are those boards for? Well, it makes sense when you're standing on land. It doesn't make any sense. But when you're sitting on the boat coming down the channel, you see those boards, and the boards are basically in line with one another. When the lines down the middle are in line, you're right in the middle of the channel.
And
So-
when you see those, are they there to let you know that you want to be in the middle of the channel and line them up?
Right.
Yeah.
You want to find the channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, you always will.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get into that in a little bit.
Okay.
And then handling wakes is pretty straightforward. So this is a video, and I'll let you watch it.
First, choose a fixed point, such as a shore landmark or navigation marker or buoy, to serve as a target destination for your desired course. If possible, create a range comprised of one near and one far away fixed points to help guide you more than a single point. Steer smoothly, making small adjustments. When the boat deviates a few degrees off course, steer back toward the course direction. This creates rotational momentum, which will keep the boat turning until you counter-steer to stop the turn. Put the wheel in the opposite direction to slow the swing of the bow, and resume course. By counter-steering, you will avoid oversteering.
In water, use a compass direction as a general guide. Adjust the crosswind or current by turning into the wind or current to stay on the desired course. But again, choose a point on the horizon or a cloud in the sky rather than relying on the compass to steer. By making small adjustments as soon as the boat's head starts to deviate from course from your visual target, stay on your predetermined course.
What is counter steering?
Any questions on that?
Steering the other way.
Counter steering basically is when you turn your wheel and the boat turns, you don't want to keep the wheel turned. You have to come back.
Yeah.
But the boat will keep wanting to turn, so you have to kind of go back a little further than
To check your momentum. Okay.
where it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
That's
kind of
exactly.
counteracts the momentum of the boat in the water.
Learning how to hold your boat along a straight line course, such as in a narrow
Second
channel,
video.
is an important skill to master. In some areas, range markers are used to help you stay in safe waters. They look like this on a chart. Like buoys, range markers are designed to keep you from wandering out of a safe
They look
channel.
like
You can also
Northwest.
make a range of your own using any two objects that align along your path. A range creates an imaginary line along the waterway in which the safest water is located. The idea, whether running toward or away from a range, is to keep your boat along that imaginary line.
Instead of using actual range markers, we'll be simulating this exercise with two buoys. This will allow us to practice running a range. We'll be running this range in two directions, first toward the range and then away from it.
The goal is to bring the boat into a position that the two buoys are aligned. As long as the buoys stay aligned, you're on course and in a real situation will be in the safest water. As you approach the imaginary line between the buoys, turn towards it, being careful not to overshoot it. Once you're in the correct position, the buoys will appear as one. You're now on the range heading. If the buoys start to separate, you're falling off the line. And when that happens, make a gradual correction to get you back onto the correct course. Now let's try running a stern range. You'll find this to be much more challenging than running up the range because you will need to frequently look over your shoulder.
Oh.
If you're falling off the line, make the necessary course adjustment to get back onto it. But just like running towards the range, be careful not to overcompensate. You will be looking backwards quite a bit, so be sure that a member of the crew keeps a forward lookout as you're performing this navigation task. A technique you can use to help you stay on course is to identify the correct compass heading of the imaginary line. When the buoys are aligned and stay aligned, check the compass, note the heading, and steer that heading away from the range. However, wind and current can move your boat while you remain on the heading, so it's important to look back and visually cross-check your position from time to time. Ranges are an important part of safely navigating your boat. When running a range, the important points are: get onto the range heading as quickly as possible, and stay on course by making minor corrections, being careful not to overcompensate.
So one of the things you need to be aware of is that you need to establish by looking at your chart or your chart plotter that this is the range I need. These two buoys are in line with the channel. If it's not, you don't want to use those as your range.
So those
Because you
didn't-
could run a
Sorry, go ahead, Marcia.
On the chart, was it those red things that looked like red buoys?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, they weren't buoys.
No, but-
They were actually ranges on land. So
Okay.
those were not the same as that. Those
Right.
were the red and white boards that they had up.
Right,
Almost-
right,
Almost like a
right.
tower.
But on the
They were on a
chart,
tower,
it
yeah.
looks like a little
It
red
looks like a-
triangle.
Like a balloon?
Red triangle.
Oh,
Now-
a triangle.
Well, it's
It's
oh,
not
like
a triangle, it's a
pointed
rounded
cylinder,
triangle.
like a
Let me
bulb.
go back.
Now, what happens when you get to the buoy? You don't want to hit the
I know,
thing.
when you get to the.
You
go
go
outside.
Then you don't need the range anymore.
Okay, good. I
Yeah,
can
you're
go.
in the
Go
channel.
ahead.
The second one, those buoys that they were using weren't marked in
They
any
weren't,
way.
I'm sorry?
Those second buoys, when they were holding the buoys in alignment,
Yeah.
those buoys were not marked in any way. How
Right,
would
they were
you,
white buoys, which
just
means
white buoys?
they were just white buoys, and they're basically,
Okay,
they're not green, they're not red, they
they have no
are,
indication, so they.
I think they were there just to practice
right.
running a range.
They're set by a local,
Yeah.
authority, either the harbor master or whatever.
Yeah.
They're not Coast Guard buoys.
Got it.
They're
Okay.
just there. They could be the starting line for a race or something like that.
Yep.
Anyway, let me just restart the beginning of this again.
Learning how to hold your boat
can't
along a
stop.
straight line course, such as in a narrow channel, is an important skill to master. In some areas, range
the
markers are
range
used to
markers
help
here?
you stay in safe waters. They look like this on a chart.
See, they're on
Like
land
buoys,
though.
range
Oh,
markers
yeah.
are
They
designed
look
to
like,
keep you
because
from
they have
wandering
that
out of a
little-
safe channel. You can also make a
Float,
range
yeah.
of
They
your
have
own
that
using
little
any
flare.
two objects
Yeah.
that align
That means
along your
they're
path.
loaded at
A
night.
range creates an imaginary line along the waterway in which the safest water
I
is
can't
located.
skip
The
forward
idea,
with this.
whether running toward or away from a range, is to
Should be able
keep
go
your
forward.
There we go, there we go, all right. So basically, you want to use a range if the range makes sense. Don't just pick any two buoys and say, well, I'm gonna head over and keep that range, because it could be a sandbar right in front of you, or a big rock. You don't wanna do that. You wanna check your chart and make sure that's open water, make sure that these are the two proper things that I wanna keep in line. On some charts, sometimes it's really hard to see on a chart plotter. Some charts, if you have a paper chart, will have a spire or a church,
Oh, yeah.
or a building or a tower or a windmill on the chart on land, and then you can line that up with a buoy and say, okay, that's gonna guide me right up the channel. But the key thing is that to go from where you're at to where you want to go, just look at the land and then look in the water and see if there's something you can line up, and that's the best way to run a range.
Mhm.
Any other questions on that? Okay, so when you're coming at another boat and you're heading toward them, they're producing a wake, and of course you're producing a wake, but if he's a bigger boat, he's gonna be producing a bigger wake. And the wakes usually come from the bow, so it's called a bow wake. And what you wanna do is you approach it, so just before the wake, just before you hit the wake, you wanna turn 45 degrees. So you wanna turn into the wake. Don't turn too early. Remember we talked about turning to show change of direction to somebody who was we were approaching on the rules of the road.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you don't want to do that too early. You don't want to show him you're going to change it direction, because if you're going to turn toward him, he's going to get frightened. You're going to run into him. So wait till he's already passed, and then turn right into his wake. And then as soon as you're over the wake, straighten out and head back on your course. Continue your course.
I'm crossing railroad ties.
And we all have that. I have that. I have a 36-foot trawler, and I, these sport fishers go by me. They're 40, 50-foot sports fishers go by, and they've got a wake about as high as this room, and I have to turn my boat into it. If not, I'm tossed all over the place. So it doesn't matter the size of the boat. It's best to try to cross someone else's wake.
45.
Everyone's familiar with trim, right? You got to make sure your boat is sitting level in the water, right? Now you got two different kinds of trim: static trim, which is the way the boat is loaded, and dynamic trim. That's when things move around. It's like if the engine is tilted the wrong way, that'll change the fore and aft trim. Or if the engine is tilted at all, it'll change the trim. We're going to talk about trim quite a bit, actually. So, static trim of your boat is just the way it's balanced, the way it sits on its waterline. If it's empty and not loaded, it'll probably sit right on the waterline like it's always there. Both port and starboard, and fore and aft. So, if you have, yeah.
That's more than they should have in that boat.
A lot more.
Is it Mark?
Notice there's a capacity plate. You got a capacity plate up there that says 8 people. One thing that's
Look at the little logo.
I've been in a few situations like that.
I know. One of the things that's missing on that is freeboard, and freeboard keeps the water out of the boat. So you got to be really careful when you're overloaded like that. So.
And hitting a wake at 45 degrees.
That's right. So freeboard keeps the water out of the boat. The higher the better. And if you're overloaded, the boat is going to sit lower in the water and reduce that freeboard. So a couple of ways that you can adjust the trim, and that's move passengers and gear around on the boat. You can also, if you've got an IO, inboard, outboard, or an outboard, you can change the trim of the motor. So you can flip it up, change the pin on the outboard, let it come back down on the pin again. That changes the angle that it sits on the stern. Or you have, on larger boats, you have trim tabs on yours, yeah, or interceptors. Interceptors are basically a trim tab, but it's a vertical plate that comes down the back. I'll show you, there's a picture of them in here. But it does the same thing as a trim tab. So, with an inboard motor or a jet drive, and we talked about jet drives, but a jet drive is just a different type of inboard motor that doesn't use propellers, it uses water thrust. You can adjust the longitudinal trim. You can't adjust that. You can't do this with the inboard or outboard. It's going to drive the water the only way it can. So with outboard or inboards, you can't adjust the lateral trim this way.
How do you adjust the lateral trim on an inboard?
The same way you do on an outboard or IO. I'll show you.
Okay.
Show you in a minute. Trim tabs.
Mhm.
Or interceptors, basically the same thing. There are external plates on the back of the boat that will adjust both the fore and aft trim as well as the lateral trim, port and starboard. And the way it does it is it deflects what they call a laminar flow of the water under the hull. So as the water comes off this transom, it comes off in a straight line. So what you do is you push these trim tabs down into that laminar flow of water, and it'll affect the boat.
Kinda like those things on the airplane wings.
It's exactly like those. Well, they do it in the air.
Right.
And you can selectively use them to lift the port or starboard sides. So trim tabs are basically a piece of metal attached to the, with a hinge across the transom of the boat, with usually a hydraulic, sometimes electric, but usually a hydraulic cylinder which adjusts them up and down. And as you can see, the water coming off the bottom of the boat is deflected by that when the trim tabs are down. So you have independent controls for each one. And it diverts the water, lifts that side of the stern. Now if you have them both down, it's going to lift both sides. But if the boat is out of balance, you can lift one side or the other side to keep it level. So if you have it, if it's raised, of course, it's not causing anything, doesn't do anything. So interceptors are the same, except as you see here, they're a vertical plate. And the vertical plate just goes down into the water. It's a lot smaller than the trim tab. The trim tab has to be long, like a, I wouldn't say water ski, but it's like that. But the interceptors are a lot smaller. So the trim tabs must be sized to the boat, and they're not practical on larger boats. There's more lift from an interceptor. And
Looks like it would cause a lot of drag.
It does, it does. But as it says, it says farther forward. I don't think that that's the right term. It basically creates more lift forward underneath the boat than a trim tab does. Trim tab deflects the water, which adjusts the boat. The interceptor will lift the boat, actually.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Specifically about my boat. So my boat was originally made for a two-stroke, but now I bought it used, and it's a four-stroke one, which is a much heavier motor.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a little low in the butt.
Yeah.
Should I look at maybe adding some trim tabs? Would that help, or is that?
You might consider that. You can also change the angle of your outboard.
Right.
I mean, changing the angle will cause, it will always sit down in the rear when you're just standing still. How is it when you're motoring?
It's not too, I mean, it has electric trim, so I can trim
Oh,
that.
you can adjust it that
I can
way?
adjust it, and
Yeah.
I definitely do that. But it's still, it just wasn't, you can tell the hull wasn't meant to have that much weight at the back.
Right, yeah.
In
But
fact, when I have people on board and they tell them to go sit up front, it handles better.
Well, that's one of the things. We're gonna talk about how trim affects planing as well. One of the things that you can probably do is, add weight to the front of the boat.
Stoke your-
That's all you can do,
Yeah, move the
That's
humans.
probably easier than.
Move all
installing trim.
your gear up underneath the seats up at forward or something. I don't really know what else you could do, because you replaced a light motor with a much heavier motor. So anyway, in smooth seas, you want to trim so that the bow is up. So basically, it's allowing you to plane a lot better. Is everyone familiar with porpoising?
No.
Yeah. That's when the bow of the boat does this.
So,
You're
so
porpoising like you're acting like a porpoise. The boat is bouncing up and down. So it has a tendency to just kind of not go far, not go well, and you're not you know, it's not very comfortable at all. And we talked a little bit about pounding in tropices. That's one of the keys. When the bow is up. So when you're in tropices, you want to try to trim with the bow down. So you want to bring the bow back down again. Now that's a slower, and it may take you out of plane, but in general you want to cut through the waves. Now, Jim and I have trawlers, and we have what's called displacement hulls, not planing hulls. So what we do is we displace the water. In other words, the boat pushes the water out of the way, and it goes through it. Planing hulls ride on top of the water, and they basically are, you know, flying across the surface of the water. So in general, you want to, on a choppy, when the water is choppy, you really want to keep the bow low, so it's pushing those chops aside.
So you would have it trimmed down.
Sorry?
You would have it trimmed down for that, right?
Trim down, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So as we talked about the dynamic and static trimming, the dynamic trimming can be affected by the engine tilt. We talked a little bit. You get electric tilt, and that's good. The trim tabs are interceptors. So trimming in, which is bow down, you can see right here where the angle of the outboard is trimmed in this way, and it's pushing the bow down. It lifts the stern up and pushes the bow down. It gives you much better steering because the keel is all in the water. And the bow takes the waves, needless to say. Now, if you have bow up, which is faster, it depresses the stern and lifts the bow, but you have less even tracking. It feels like the bow wants to walk all over the place. And
Is that the same, and that's where you get porpoising and
correct.
and pounding?
Yep.
That's what I got,
Porpoising and pounding?
to a modest extent. I mean, not much with the 3 horsepower on the rowboat.
So
but
what's happening is that the waves are hitting the hull of the boat, and that's what's causing all of that.
Yeah.
As well as there's not a lot of wetted surface to give the hull any tracking capabilities. So I don't know why we don't have a thing here. Too much trim, poor hull design can cause porpoising. Oh, that's what this is about. And that's basically, it's an up and down ride of the bow of the boat. So how do you adjust your lateral trim? And that could be by just lowering your port side trim tab. That will lift that side of the boat, and you don't lower the starboard side. It lifts that up and balances the boat. So using your trim tabs, you can adjust the lateral as well as the fore and aft trim. What you really want to strive for is a nice, even, well-riding boat. So what happens when you get your boats up on a plane? We can't get ours on a plane. We don't have motors strong enough to get it up on a plane. So the majority of power boats are designed to ride on a plane, and they ride on the water, not in the water. That's their goal. So it takes a lot of power to get a boat up on the plane. It also depends on the hull design as well. But they must climb up on their own bow wave. So they're going to create a bow wave, and then they climb up on top of it. And then after they get up there, it doesn't take much power to keep them there. Yep. So if you look at this chart, the fuel efficiency drops severely as you increase speed to get up onto the plane. But once you get up on the plane, you can back off. And it really doesn't use as much fuel to stay on the plane. The hardest part is keeping it on the plane. Have you had your boat up on a plane?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
But in Provincetown Harbor,
Yeah,
it's rough.
Yeah, I know.
You need just the right day
Yep.
to get it up there and hold it.
Yep. So one of the things you really need to worry about with planing is that the pivot point on your boat changes as the speed increases.
Mm.
So on a,
So the tracking changes significantly when you get on a plane.
Mm.
You're up in the air, and well, we'll show you in a minute. So,
Mm.
and you make your own waves by your wake.
Can you see around me?
Oh, good, thank you.
And as it says right here, you gain experience on your boat, because every boat is unique. They all have their own characteristics that will all steer a little differently. And you know, those of you who've been on a number of different boats will understand that. So depending upon how much of the wetted surface here is in the water, the pivot point will move on the boat.
Uh-huh.
So as the boat gets on a plane, the pivot point moves aft. So the boat will, you'll actually, that's what makes the bow feel like it's unstable. That's it. It's ready to move any minute, because the pivot point is now moved back on the hull. So one of the things you have to worry about is when you're on a plane, when you get off the plane, you can get swamped. You know, you gotta worry that
The water catches up to you.
the water catches up to you and then comes in over your stern rail and swamps the boat. So one of the best things to do is you ease back gradually, or you change direction. And a lot of people, well, they'll show you in a minute how to do what they call a quick stop video.
There are times when you might have to stop your boat quickly to avoid hitting something on the water. If you just pull the throttle back, the sudden stop can result in a stern wave that pushes you beyond the point where you want it to stop, or you could be swamped by the stern wave coming over the transom of your boat. To start the exercise, we'll get the boat up on plane and head down towards an orange buoy we've placed in the water. As you approach the buoy, turn the helm hard over at 90 degrees to your direction of travel, and at the same time, pull the throttle to neutral. This will put the boat at a right angle to the buoy and allow the boat to come to a stop without gliding past the
Notice
buoy
how the
or
water-
risking your stern wave striking you.
That
Wow.
stern wave came right back.
The key
and
points to keep in mind
see
with
it
an
to
emergency
stop.
stop
It will come
are:
right in.
take swift and decisive action. Simultaneously pull the power off and turn the wheel to stay clear of the onrushing stern wave.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's great. Great technique.
So those are some of the little tricks you'll use. So when you're making a turn and you're on plane, one of the things you need to be aware of is that your boat will side slip. Because remember, the pivot point has moved to the rear, you've got less wetted hull to keep you in the water. So what'll happen is that the whole boat will move sideways as you're going around a corner. So the other thing that will happen on a corner is that it'll drop off the plane and slow down. So beware of dropping off the plane, and will have a tendency to have the bow dip into the water, which is not a good thing. See, what'll happen is that the boat will seem to wanna spin around on
Yeah.
that pivot point. And then that's when your cockpit becomes full of water.
And the bilge pump doesn't help.
Hopefully it will. Anyway, the advice here is to stay on the plane through the turn.
At speed.
You have to keep your speed up to stay on plane. So whoops, hang on, that's drift. I'll go back. So basically what you wanna do is you wanna stay on the plane and make a very gradual turn, not a sharp turn. You wanna try to keep that under control. And again, you might be limited by, you don't wanna hit an island, or you don't wanna, hit another boat or whatever. But just be cautious, plan ahead, think ahead. So one of the things that we all, especially if you're a sailor, you'll see this all the time, is that you have a desired course that you wanna follow, but then you've got current and you've got wind that's pushing you off that course. And the only way that you can correct for that is to steer into the current and wind. Not easily seen on a chart, not easily seen anywhere except through your eyes and what's going on around you. You'll see the current coming, or you'll see the wind blowing in the trees, you'll see it's coming from that direction. And so you know that it's pushing you off course. And if you have a range, for example, you will see all of a sudden your ranges don't line up. So if you set a range here and you say, oh, wait a minute, that church on the land is not lined up with that buoy in the water anymore, I gotta veer off a little bit. And you can use ranges to make that correction.
Is there, any time when the wind will be different from the current?
Oh yeah, many times. If the current is formed by the water in a river or an inlet, the wind is in the air. In
So
most
what if you have-
cases out at high seas, the wind is usually behind the waves. It's creating the waves. We'll talk about that in a minute too.
Okay.
But in an inlet, you can have current running out
Right.
when the tide is going down in the ocean, and there's water inland coming out the inlet. The water will change direction, and you'll have a current flowing out. The wind could be blowing in at the same time. If you go down the Cape Cod Canal, Cape Cod Canal has a current, changes every 6 hours, 6.5 hours, and
Changes direction?
changes direction.
Because of the tide.
Yeah, you got an ebb and flood on almost everything like that. And if you are not aware of which direction it's running, you could run into some standing waves, you can run into a lot of water that's dangerous. So I don't know how many of you have been up and down the canal.
We took our boat to do it.
Hmm?
When we got our boat, we came up through the canal, and it was a calm day, it was beautiful.
Oh yeah, calm days
Very pretty
could
when
be.
you can do that.
Depends on the time of day. Anyway, so when you're out at sea, it's a little different. And so you have head seas, which are those coming right at you. You're running right into the waves and into the wind. Beam seas you want to avoid if at all possible, and following seas, they're coming up behind you. They're following you along.
What are beam?
Beam is right off each side,
Parallel. Kind of.
so
Perpendicular.
perpendicular to you. So
Yeah.
they'd be off coming this way. The waves are coming at you this way. The waves are coming at you this way. Okay? So one of the concepts you have to understand is fetch. Fetch is the distance that wind travels over open water to create waves. So the further the distance to create a wave, the wind travels over that, and it will travel along creating waves as it goes. Okay? Now, this is where you are. You have a fetch coming up to you and dispersion after you. So, waves have a number of characteristics. The key ones are the height and the length. And if you go on to any of the buoys, I don't know, I have two, the Massachusetts Bay buoy and I have the Boston buoy, weather buoys available on my iPhone. and I'll check them out, and I'll look at what is the wave height and the wavelength. The wavelength is the distance between the crests of the waves, and the height, of course, is the height from the trough, the bottom of the trough to the height of the wave. Now, this is really important in a couple of aspects. One is this distance, wave height, if there was no wind and no waves, the water would sit halfway. Realize that if you're in Vineyard Sound, which is in some areas is only 14 feet deep, and you're in a boat with a 7-foot keel, and you're in 6-foot waves, 6-foot waves, that means it's down 3 feet. The trough is 3 feet lower than the mean water depth.
Yeah. So you only got 4 feet there to play with.
You got a 7-foot keel.
Yeah.
And your sailboat, you gotta be careful,
So
it's
you-
nothing on the bottom gonna hit you. So you've gotta be aware that the trough is deeper than what the reading in the chart is.
Yeah.
So your soundings on your chart are mean low water. So what you need to worry about is that if you're in deep waves, you could hit the bottom.
Right, because the water is moving out of the trough and going up.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all the same water.
Yeah.
It's just the surface of it is being affected by the wind. Okay?
What app do you have on your iPhone? That,
Oh, it's not an app, it's just basically I can access those buoys. Basically,
like Google Maps or something?
no, it's just, hang on.
Boy, our phones do everything now.
I
don't
know,
they?
it's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
When there's more power in this phone than when I started in the computer business in 1972. That we had an entire floor of the mill over in Maynard, an entire floor, which was just one computer system.
Which is down there.
No, it's nothing compared to this.
Oh,
This is
wow.
10
Oh,
times.
that's what I'm saying, all that stuff is in there.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
10 times what this is.
It's astounding.
10 times what this is. But yeah, you can access those on Google, you can access them on any browser.
What are they called?
They're the Boston buoys, or they're actually the NOAA buoys, NOAA.
NOAA buoys.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write it down. We'll get those on our phones, so
But
that
you
we
can
can
see-
watch out for the troughs.
I'd love to go in Boston.
So what you can see is with
Me
the
too.
wind intensity, the higher the wind, the more you have to worry. Always worry anyway because of the wind. There's hurricanes and all that stuff, but when it gets up to gale force or any higher levels of winds, you have to really worry because you get breaking waves. One of my trips, I've sailed to Bermuda 7 times on my 29-foot sailboat, and one of them we were out in a gale, about 150 miles north of Bermuda. Anyway, and we had breaking waves. We had 30-foot breaking waves,
Oh my God.
and it was not a fun time. We were out there for 14 hours, and the following day was one of the most amazing things I ever saw in my life because, well, we'll talk about wave height, but we were probably in the same, about 30-foot seas, and it was like you come over the crest of a wave, and you look down, and you're just looking down 3 stories.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden the boat takes off and shoots down that wave, and it's like being shot out of a rocket ship.
And then the next crest comes
And then on the next one, and you just wait, and you just wait, and you just wait. And that night, it was as flat as glass. And I could see we were just ghosting along, probably, 3-4 knots with the sails up, and you could see our wake as far as you could see in the moonlight.
How beautiful.
But the previous 2 days were a nightmare.
And you
But
live
I
to
always-
tell.
But I always say sailing is, 99% boredom laced with 1% terror. Anyway, so, okay, when you wanna go offshore, or when you wanna take high seas, and this could happen in Massachusetts Bay. It happened to me coming home from Provincetown,
Really?
coming back to Boston from Provincetown, really, really high seas. It was like driving up to a 12 or 14-foot wall of
In the
water.
bay?
And it'll happen to you coming out of the canal, either direction, depending upon how the wind is blowing. I've had that wall of water both on Buzzards Bay side and on Cape Cod Bay side, on Massachusetts Bay side. The real key thing you gotta worry about is that if you're coming down the back of a wave, that your bow might go right into the next wave. That's the real worry, because if that happens, you're in trouble.
Digging to
Rough ride or you swamp your boat. So the best thing to do is to take all of these at an angle. And what does this do? The distance between the crests of the waves gets longer,
Mm-hmm.
because you're at an angle.
Like a diagonal.
You take it 45. Yeah, take it at a diagonal. And it gives you a better ability to maneuver, because the distance between the crests of the waves, your wavelength, becomes longer. So the wave, as you approach it, since you're not in straight line with the waves, you're gonna get a roll, but that's okay. But the big issue with beam seas, got that,
Yep, wanna show it?
yeah. I wanna show you a little, video that I,
You don't wanna do this at home.
do not
Do
do
not
this at
try
home.
this outside of class.
Worst case disaster.
Oh, where did it go?
Oh, you didn't see it.
Oh, I thought I did. Oh, it was in YouTube.
Depends on the day, but in the harbor, it can be done.
Was it Firefox or did you do it on
And also
YouTube?
when the tide is out, you really don't wanna go.
I thought it was in Firefox. Oh.
Yeah, whenever your boat is sitting in the water and it's either not under control or you have beam seas, there's always a possibility that you get swamped. But the worst thing,
How do you get rid of beams?
it almost looked like it.
It was.
Turn around.
Nothing feels quite like hitting a PXG iron. That's because we use hollow body construction, thinnest club face in golf, and a vibration absorbing polymer. More forgiveness, better distance, and lower scores. PXG, nobody makes golf clubs the way we do, period.
Here we go. Oh, they can't see it.
What happened?
What happened?
Okay, if you turn that thing around, you might be able to model it.
You don't see that body.
I lost control here.
No. This hope? Okay. There you go.
It's funny, I just. I don't have a mouse anymore. I think we should take a bathroom break, what do you think?
Yeah, stretch it out.
Bizarre.
Does it help to go into display
No, I can't, it's
on the
frozen.
settings?
It's not responding for some reason. That was not a good idea, I guess.
There
Okay,
we
here we
go.
go.
Okay.
What'd you do, turn it on
Can
and
you
off?
restart that? Oh, but that's, start from the beginning.
Wow.
There we
Okay,
go.
here we go.
There we go. Well, what's gonna happen, this boat is adrift.
This is being taken from a Coast Guard helicopter.
Yeah.
Oh, the engine's not
You'll see-
working?
Yeah, there's a guy on the transom with the rescue swimmer here in the water. Now watch this.
Oh.
Now that's like a 42-foot main ship up there.
Now you're going out over again.
There's like lifeguards that go out and rescue people in situations like that.
But notice where the boat is relative to the wave.
Right. It's side to the wave.
Let's look at that again.
Yeah.
If you were right into the wave,
Yeah. That wouldn't happen.
Good, tell them the backstory of the stolen boat, right?
you don't want to be,
Stolen boat? Look at the person swimming.
that's the rescue swimmer.
It's a
Oh,
rescue-
it is.
Rescue swimmer?
Yeah, I've read about those. I think if I was young, I would have loved to have done that for a
Oh
while.
my God. He managed to locate the man in the surf and
That's one powerful wave.
See the way, see where the Coast Guard boat is?
See this
Yeah,
rescue
see the way they're
swimmer.
riding it? They're not going parallel to it.
So these are the kind of waves that you'll get in the ocean, but you never want to get side to the waves. Thanks, Jim.
That was
No,
great.
I'll never
It's
forget.
on YouTube. It's on YouTube.
There was being said about this, so that was
Can
at
you
the
send us
where the
that
Columbia
link?
River comes into the Pacific. Because it's some of the roughest water there is, the Coast Guard trains there for that reason.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
We need the audio.
Do you want the audio?
Yeah, well, it's gonna, actually, I don't think I need the audio. There's no more, what do you got?
I
Some
just
music
have to
on?
turn it off.
Oh, I see.
It's still running.
Whoa. And they managed to pull the person out though, huh?
They did.
They rescued
Now,
someone.
he
in
stole that boat, the guy who was on it.
there. Oh.
He stole the boat from somewhere in Seattle area and was
Jeez.
out to ocean, at the ocean and, got in trouble. His engine died, probably ran out of fuel or something. Something simple, I'm sure.
Especially.
Did he have a life jacket on?
I couldn't tell,
Yeah.
but knowing how stupid he was, probably not.
He's lucky to be alive.
Yeah, I'll find it then. Thanks. Anyway, those are the kinds of things you have to be really aware of when you're out at sea, because it's not forgiving. It really
Lots of
isn't.
mackerel.
Fish.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things out there that can really affect you.
And you certainly don't want to be out in seas that are 20 feet.
There, unfortunately, when you do some offshore sailing or offshore motoring, even it's unpredictable.
Yeah.
Jim did a run from, you were in Atlantic City or you were in Cape May, and you ran from Cape May all the way straight to Block Island, right? Yeah. That's a straight line right across, and he was way out to sea. And that could have happened to him. Those
Right.
waves could just occur. That one that capsized that boat was what they call a rogue wave. So what'll happen is that you've got a lot of bumpy water, and then all of a sudden something pops up, and it'll just kind of tear you apart. Okay, so where was I? Okay, so we were over this way here, the bow, taking waves at an angle, gives you better, these
This
are
one,
beam
one
seas, and
is
that's what can happen to you, right at the bottom. That's the most dangerous place to be on
So you would have to, if you were going diagonal, you'd just have to keep adjusting.
yeah, you are working really hard.
Yeah.
As I was telling you on that gale that I was in, we were hove to, well, we'll get into that in a little bit as well. What do we get for time? Oh, I'm flying through this thing. Anyway, we were hove to for about 14 hours. A hove to means that I had a sea anchor out off the bow, and I had just my storm jib, and my tiller was, my wheel was locked over all the way, and I was just riding the backs of waves like that. That's all I was doing. Just a regular riding up and down the backs of a wave. And during that time, about 3 o'clock in the morning, I talked to the captain of the Portuguese tall ship, the Sagres, and he was running before the wind, and he was having a heck of a time. And his boat was, they couldn't, he said his topsails were still up, and he couldn't send anybody out there. His cadets could not climb the rigging to take the sails down, so he had to stay in front of the waves and run before the wind, because if not, he would tear the sails. He would ruin
What does that
it,
mean, before
maybe
the wave?
pull the, sorry?
Before the wave, what does that mean again?
He's running in front of the wind.
Okay.
He's
In other
running
words,
into it.
Into it,
No, not
No,
into
with
it,
the
no.
With the wind.
He's with the wind.
right.
Well, I thought that was following seas.
It is,
Oh, okay,
but he was running before the wind, yeah.
got it. Okay, same thing as
Same thing.
following seas, got it.
Following
Okay,
seas.
Yeah.
So he was running that way, and he was diving through the water. But he had all been battened down, and everything was taken care of, so they were okay, except he was at the mercy of the wind.
Yeah.
Which is a scary place to be.
And what were you doing?
I was hove to, which means I was just sitting still. I wasn't sitting still,
Right,
really.
right.
I was just what they call sawing.
Cause you
My-
dropped your anchor?
No,
No,
it's
you
a
were
sea
just-
anchor.
You were
okay.
just
We'll
staying.
talk about sea anchors and drogues in a minute, but but I was just sitting still in the water.
And it was pushing you along.
So you're just trying to park yourself on a
I was
wave,
parked on the back of the
one wave.
waves, right?
Okay.
It's exactly right. Yeah.
So I've done some ocean swimming, and I've been on both sides of this. And when they come behind you, it's like you go way up in the air and
Oh, yeah.
come down, and you just fly.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. That's what a boat
It's
does
beautiful.
as well.
It's absolutely beautiful. when that's-
It's not beautiful in a boat. It's scary as hell. It's exhilarating, I would say, but it's scary as hell.
because you have lack of control.
We'll talk about broaching in a minute, but that's one of the things that really is scary about those kinds of waves and with the wind, because once you lose control of the boat,
Don't get it.
you're at nature's mercy, and you never want to be there. You always want to have some control over the boat. Anyway, so following seas, getting to your following seas that we just chatted about, they appear smoother because you're looking at the backs of the waves, okay, in front of you, but the seas are coming up behind you. So if you're running before the wind, with the wind, the relative speed reduces your speed, because the water and the boat are moving in the same direction. So the water and the wind will reduce the speed of your boat through the water. And that's what happens when you slow down through the water.
You lose your plane.
Or you lose steerage.
Lose the plane, but also you lose steerage. You have to have movement over the rudder or you can't steer. So you gotta be careful because you lose your maneuverability. So following sea is very risky and can cause a lot of problems. Because as we just talked about, you don't have as much steering control. You must match its speed and direction. So if you're going the same speed, that means you're idle in the water. So you have very little control. And the worst thing is, you can get swamped by the wave behind you. So the objective, if you're on a following C, is you wanna stay on the back of the wave, the back of the wave you're on. And you wanna be about a third of the distance down from the peak of that wave. The hardest part is being able to tell where you are on the wave and how fast the seas are moving. And if you've been out there a lot, you'll find that, or at least realize that waves move in different speeds. It'd be really nice if everything was predictable and every wave was exactly the same, but as you just saw in that video, there are certain waves that are a little higher than others, and there are certain waves that are rogue waves, and there are certain waves that are less than the other. So it changes speed and it changes intensity. So again, you gotta be careful of the wave behind you, or maybe if it's a slow wave, you don't adjust your speed, you may go over the crest. And then that'll be the same thing, you'll be going down into the trough with your, so the danger of going over the crest is that your bow is gonna go right into the trough. So what you wanna do is, as soon as you go over you wanna immediately try to change direction. See how that will kick the boat to the side.
Can you go back for a minute?
Oh, sure. Back further?
No,
here?
yeah, right there. So you're intentionally turning back into the,
What you wanna do is you wanna avoid the bow digging into the back of the other wave.
right, but that light blue dotted arrow line, does
Yeah.
that show that you turned the boat intentionally?
Or you could do it, or it could be done for you. Your stern could be pushed aside
Okay,
by the wave. It really depends upon the intensity of this wave that you just went over.
mhm,
If it's really, the wind is high and it's breaking wave, that can push you sideways, it can do almost anything. Depends on how you went over the top crest of the wave. And you already saw her capsize, so I won't show you.
I got
So
nightmares.
with following seas, you wanna try to match the wave speed. Again, third of the way back from the crest. Go back down and let the following seas run under your hull. This can be very scary, because all of a sudden, as your swimming experience was, the boat all of a sudden picks up and you're now being picked up this way, and then you straighten out, and now you're on the back of the wave that was
Previous wave.
behind you. So it gets a little scary.
if that wave is too tall,
And
then
go
go
over,
over the wave in front and
Yeah.
go down the cliff.
do it again, yeah. So make sure that you keep your stern square to the wave in front. And it's really hard to do. You're working hard. You're out there, your wheel is spinning, you know, you're going as fast as you can to try to
My stomach.
keep that, try to keep that boat on an even keel, as they say.
And
So,
the
what is
real
it-
challenge is to do-
Everyone know what a broach is, when your boat broaches? That's,
So,
Sideways,
broadside to
usually,
the
it,
wave?
a broach really means that when your boat is in a position where the keel has no control. So sometimes when a sailboat is heeled over too far, the keel comes out of the water. I mean, the rudder comes out of the water. So, other times when a motorboat is on a very steep, climb like this on the top of a wave, there's no rudder. So what'll happen is that all of a sudden now the water takes charge and it will twist you and you have no control. You could steer that boat all over the place. That's called a
Black
broach.
ice.
And usually what ends up doing is you end up falling off like this, turning. But when you wanna, oops, I'm not going, oh, there we go. So what you wanna do is regardless of where you wanna end up. This is not right, this has turned into a survival cruise, this is not, I'm gonna go for a cruise home, I'm not going
You're
home,
not going in a direction anymore.
I'm gonna
You're
survive.
staying alive.
Staying alive, there you go. Let's all go disco. Anyway, so what you wanna do is you literally wanna turn around and go back over that wave. Because if you don't, you know, you're gonna end up being beamed to the beam seas and you will capsize.
Yeah.
It's not fun.
Assume the worst.
What?
Not fun for the same here.
No, but it's good to know, good to have a point of reference of what
No,
you
but
can do.
There's always a possibility. You don't wanna be a statistic, and we don't want you to be a statistic.
No, but if you have some point of reference of what you could do.
Right. So handling in heavy seas, your path will be directed by the waves, not by the direction you wanna go. Even if you can see where you wanna go, if the water is really rough, you wanna read the waves. It's really key. Safety comes first. Safety of you, your crew, your boat, because without the boat, you have a tough time surviving. Even if you're a mile offshore, not many of us can swim a mile. It's tough. Even in a life jacket, it's harder to swim.
It's true.
So you'll zigzag crossing the waves and look ahead, always plan a path through the waves. This is a very good graphic right here, because it shows, I don't know why we have a corner up there, but that's all right. It shows that this is the wave pattern. What you wanna do is you wanna avoid the white crests.
Yeah.
Okay, and you wanna pick your way through the waves.
Yep.
Is
Yeah.
this still
And it
with
can
the
be
following
exciting.
sea?
Sorry?
Is this still with the following
No.
sea, or this is heavy seas?
This could be with any seas.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether the wind is blowing this direction or this direction.
But see how it's going at the diagonal to avoid the white caps?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What you wanna do is you wanna pick your way through. You plan your way.
Oh, see that gray arrow? I
Yeah.
think that would indicate the wind is going that way.
That's what the wind is
So
doing.
you're going into the wind on that,
Yeah.
Marjorie.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why they drew that as if it's in a corner. We're sailing out of a room or something.
Oh, yes.
That's the graphic.
So we cross at an angle, but then you straighten over the.
Yeah, where it's
Right.
smooth, you're crossing at the angle
Okay.
when you see those white caps.
Yeah, what you wanna do is, as I said,
'Cause those are the
he's
steep ones.
steering in this direction to avoid this
Oh,
white
okay,
cap.
that one.
And then he comes up this way because of this white cap, and then he avoids that white cap, and then he comes this way. You know, so he's kind of driving it through the different.
It's kinda like skiing,
Like-
like you don't wanna go straight down the hill, you wanna.
Right.
Yeah, you gotta go
Sides.
around
Yeah,
them moguls.
Exactly.
It's all about safety and survival. Now, when you're in heavy seas, that's what it's about. And my experience in that gale, we were blowing 125 miles off course and ended up about 125 miles east of Bermuda and had to find our way back. And it was a tough couple of days.
What type of
We
speed
were,
do you use this,
we were
get it
three-
as fast as you as a control the boat to move along?
yeah.
Was that in the current trawler?
No, that was a sailboat, 29-foot sailboat that I had. Back in the good old days. I haven't done offshore sailing since 1992. Anyway,
Yeah, if you have a choice, when you look at the weather before you go out for the day, you see heavy seas, you just don't go out.
Right.
You avoid being in these conditions,
Yep.
period.
Yep.
But you were offshore, you were
You don't get
going
a-
to Bermuda,
You
you
don't
don't,
have a choice then.
It's
you don't
like-
have any choice, yeah.
like when we were planning the trip, everyone would say, "Oh, you're going to Bermuda. Where do you tie up at night?" You know, you sail 24/7, and you have crew that you just keep going. There's
How
no-
many days does it take usually?
Well, it depends on the boat. The bigger the boat, the shorter the time. But my boat was projected to get to Bermuda in 6 days. And this
From
trip
Boston?
with the gale, it took us 2 extra days to get back. So we were there, it took us 8 days to get there. Of course, my wife was crazy and talking to the Coast Guard down there, it was insane. But we got there, we survived. That's why I'm here.
Otherwise, I'd
And
be
we're
teaching
glad.
class.
That's right.
And we're happy.
Anyway, so the key things, when the seas build beyond normal conditions, you always want to go into the seas if you can. Again, if there's a lighthouse right in front of you, don't go that way, you know. But they are preferred. You want to, well, it says nearly straight on, even though I've already talked about 45 degrees, but the next slide will help you understand that better. Again, when handling heavy seas. So keep the bow under the waves using power or sea anchor. We'll talk about sea anchors in a minute. If you're in the following seas, you consider using a drogue, and I'll talk about that in a minute. That keeps your boat in line with the water and keeps the stern from being pushed aside by the water. So taking head seas in moderate waves, 45 degrees. Building seas, 30 degrees. And in heavy seas, either straight on or about 10 degrees, 10 to 15 degrees. So you want to, the higher the waves, or the higher the
less the
wind,
angle.
the more straight into it you want to be.
That makes
And
sense.
is that, why is that? Because at a greater angle you'll capsize?
Well, no, the waves themselves will be pushing the bow over.
Gotcha.
In other words,
Oh, okay.
see this breaking wave right here is going to push this bow a lot more in this direction than it will in this direction or this direction. It has more power to push the boat to the side, and you don't want it to be pushed to the side.
Okay.
Okay. So this is called a sea anchor, and it's deployed off the bow of the boat,
Wow.
and it anchors. It's just like an anchor. It anchors you in the water, because what it does is that with the wind pushing the boat, this holds the boat in the water at a fixed distance. So you deploy it from the bow of the boat, and it will hold your boat in the water so that it just kind of bobs along. A drogue, on the other hand, is deployed now. It's deployed off the stern of the boat, and it keeps the stern square to the water. It'll also slow you down to the speed of the water. And they have this little thing that they stick in the end here about the trip lines are deployed to deflate them, because you got to retrieve them, you have to deflate them. In other words, you have to pull them back. So, but these are real keys if you're going to go offshore.
So sea anchor is for heading into the wind, and a drogue is for following.
No, these are basically to be used to hold the boat steady in heavy seas. Now, with a sea anchor, you can do one of two things. Sea anchor is basically just you stop the boat. You're not moving in the water. You're just anchored in the water. That's why it's called an anchor.
So you're just bouncing.
You're just bouncing along. I deployed this during the gale, and we just kind of sat in the waves and just bobbed along for 14 hours.
Just waited it out. You waited it.
Yeah, we waited it out. Yeah.
So, but how to keep the bow into the wind?
The wind is blowing on the boat, which is
Right.
floating in the water.
Yep.
The sea anchor is underneath the water.
No, I got it. It's just
and
holding you there.
it's just holding the bow of the boat here, and the
Yep.
wind is keeping the boat.
Just the
This
wind is
way.
faster than the water.
Yeah, so the
that's why
wind it's not gonna spin you into a beam situation.
That's
Right.
That's what it's preventing you from
Yeah,
doing.
Yeah.
got it,
Oh,
got it.
So it keeps you anchored at that spot
Yeah.
in the water. But as I said, in certain cases, like in my case with the gale, we were hove to for 14 hours and it pushed us 125 miles off. So even though we weren't literally moving, we didn't have the sails up,
You got
we
carried.
weren't moving, we
Yeah.
got carried 125
But you're
miles
still
away.
at the rudder, keeping yourself.
No,
You could just.
I
throw
just
the sinker and
locked the rudder all the way over to keep the boat on the back of the wave,
Okay.
and that was it. And we went down below and prayed. Anyway, so these are safety devices for offshore or heavy weather sailing. So the other thing you need to be careful about is you always want to seek calmer seas, and you have problem with the wind carrying water toward an island or toward a peninsula, is that the water gets disturbed as it approaches that. So you want to avoid that if at all possible. And you'll see it when you're traveling along the shore. So it has a tendency to back down and founder in these areas as it approaches here, but it's nice and smooth going around the island. I call it an island, but it's really a so if you can seek water to the lee of the land, which is the opposite side of where the wind's blowing, it's a lot calmer. So what do we got for inlets? One of the things that this looks to me like, well, it's not quite Falmouth Harbor, but it's very similar to entering Falmouth Harbor. An inlet is basically where you have a body of water and there's a cut that comes out into the ocean. This can have a current and will obviously have wind. So you have to deal with wind and current in those inlets as well. The United States Power Squadron, which is America's boating club mother, whatever you want to call it, was founded based upon running the inlet at Newburyport. If you ever saw Chapman's, there's a book called Chapman's Piloting, Piloting Seamanship and Small Boat Handling, and I've got 3 copies at home. I think every major issue, and the Chapman founded U.S. Power Squadrons because of his need to learn how to run that inlet at Newburyport, Massachusetts, which is tough. That's a tough inlet. So usually we have steep waves, and I talked about that wall of water that you can run into at the base, at the beginning of any inlet. And so where you have this smooth water, what looks smooth, but could have a lot of current depending upon whether the tide is going up or down in the ocean. To balance this water, you'll have a current that either runs in or out of the inlet. And the wind, of course, will be over the land, so it doesn't really, it's not the same as being out in the ocean when the wind and the waves are running in the same direction. They're running in most frequently are running in opposite directions. And of course, just when you have a limited amount of room to maneuver, it's like that video, those videos you were talking about earlier, where they have a lot of chop and they have a lot of stuff that affects the boats going in and out. So you got a large quantity of water flowing through a narrow inlet. And of course, you need to maintain a straight course, and the winds and currents may oppose. They may also be perpendicular to each other. So the wind could be blowing you sideways, and the current could be pushing you forward. And so you really need to analyze all of that when you go through an inlet. The worst condition, of course, is when you have an outgoing current and the wind's coming in straight on your nose. Because what's going to happen? The wind's going to try to slow the boat down. the current's gonna try to accelerate the boat, but when the boat slows down by the wind, and the current's speeding up to almost the speed of the boat, what happens to your maneuverability?
Slip slide.
You don't have any. And you're in a narrow channel, you're in a narrow inlet. So you gotta be really careful about that.
And you can't just go too slow.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and again, you get these standing waves which are really, they can surprise you. I've seen 4, 5, 6 foot wall of water at the end of the canal at a number of different inlets that it's just scary. And you say, I don't think it's time to leave. I'm gonna wait 3 or 4 hours and go out when it's calmer. That's called being prudent. So if you can see the waves, can I get through them? Can you? And if you feel you can't, turn around and go back. It's the safest thing. Yeah, wait for another time. Or find another inlet. Unfortunately, this is on the Intracoastal, and some places like Cape Hatteras and that area, you'll have multiple inlets into the same area. So you could go to a different inlet that maybe the winds are different. But we don't have multiple inlets around this area that I know of. Anyway, so when you're departing an inlet, the current in the opposite direction, you must take the waves while maintaining a straight track. And we've talked about the current and the wind acting opposite on the speed of the boat. So you may not have the maneuverability to keep that straight track. So the worst conditions is when you have the wind behind you, which is what is creating waves coming in on top of the current, as well as the current going opposite you. And that'll try to have a tendency that those waves will push the stern of your boat to the side. So when you come up to that inlet, if you remember the picture of the inlet, you might want to approach it from the side. So you're coming up along the side and you can look into the inlet and see what's happening in the inlet. So you can see these waves because you can't really see them from behind. When you're driving right up on the back of waves, they all look flat. Everything looks flat. Find a wider inlet if you could. Or try a favorable tide, which means wait. Wait for your entrance or your exit. And then, as I said, if you do make a decision to go, you're going to be working. You're going to have to work it and pay attention all the way through that inlet. Be very cautious that you don't get out of control. So standing waves, this happens to be a picture, I think this is a picture of the Sagamore Bridge of the canal, satellite picture, or maybe an airplane, I don't know. And these are standing waves that you will find in the canal. They're not big, they're little, but they will affect your boat. They'll bounce you all over the place. You've been through that, right? Yeah. We're lucky because displacement hulls aren't affected as much as planing hulls. Planing hulls will get bounced all over. But standing waves are things you need to worry about. Oop, I just went backwards.
Opposing wind and current.
They tend to build significantly and they stay in one place. That's why they're called standing. They stay there at that place.
3 rounds right there.
Yeah.
Get through one, then you got it.
Yep.
Jeez, that's quite a scary thing to encounter.
Well,
Groups.
the thing to
Groups of
do,
them.
the thing to do is know that happens in the Cape Cod Canal.
Yeah.
So you don't wanna go through the Cape Cod Canal unless you know you have enough power to get through it.
Right.
And, it's generally not a good idea to go through it when you're opposing the current, right?
Right.
Current's going this way, you're going this way, and it's at the peak of the tide.
Yeah.
Because that thing's whipping through there like 4 to 6 knots, right?
Yep.
And,
Yeah, it can be, as
these waves
fast
can be
as,
5 or 6 feet.
fast as, yes.
Just standing waves that just keep on staying in the same place. And, it's pretty scary.
Could be scary. But you would handle it the same way you would the open ocean.
Yeah.
You know, you approach the wave, you analyze which direction it's going. Am I gonna go over it? Do I stay with it? If it's a standing wave, it's not gonna move, so you can't really stay with it.
And you don't know how
You know.
high it is.
Well, you don't really know how high it is because you don't know what the trough is on the other side. A standing wave is just there and doesn't move.
So you just have to go over it.
You go over it and hope for the best, but keep control of the boat.
Not in our boats.
We're not going on, oh, we're not taking us down
No.
Yeah, I wouldn't take your boat through the Cape Cod Canal.
or mine.
No. But anyway, so when you're in a river, it's a little different. Currents in a river have a tendency to flow toward the outside. Of course, they just kind of, you know, it's
Yep.
the land that's changing the direction of the water down a river. So as the current flows, it's going down toward the outside of the bend. And on the inside, you're gonna get shoaling. That's all the dirt and stuff that it's picked up all along its path, and that now it's just deposited over here. But it won't accumulate on the outside because the outside is being flushed by faster moving water. So you get eddy currents as well in there. The eddy currents can turn your boat around. You got to be really cautious of that, as well as the shoaling could end up, you know, being shallow, and you could end up running aground. So what you want to do with your boat is you want to avoid being on the outside as well. One, that's where the fastest water is, and two, you don't want to hit the bank. So you want to be careful to avoid the inside because of the eddies may affect you turning the boat as well. So you want to stay in the middle of the channel. Now, one of the things that we talked about when I did the rules of the road is when you approach a bend in the river and the inland rules, what do you have? One prolonged blast on your horn, right? So one prolonged blast on the horn before you go around the bend. Why?
So they know you're coming.
So they know you're coming. Well, they may be on the other side of that bend. So you gotta be cautious because when you get around that bend, there might be a tug right in front of you or a barge right in front of you. And you need to be cautious, so you may end up on the side of the river. But don't go on the inside of the barge, go on the outside of the barge.
Go on the outside of the boat.
Towards the faster water.
Right.
Because otherwise you get into the eddy and it'll spin you around and whack you into the barge.
Yep. You don't want that to happen. Nope, I'm hitting the back. Hitting the wrong button. They make it bigger for that purpose. So guess what? Where are we?
Question and answers.
So, you've gone to sea with your boat and you've learned how to tie 2 knots. Well, you haven't really learned how to tie 2 knots, but you will in Marlin Spike speak.
Go around the tree and back down the hole.
There you go.
What are you, a rabbit?
A little rabbit. It could be a skunk, but rabbits are cuter and smell better. Anyway, so we talked a little bit about trimming. Any questions on any of this stuff? Any experiences or answers that you want to share? Cool. So there are topics that you need to read in the text. The thing for operating near larger vessels, near military and restricted areas and in locks. Has anyone transited a lock? I know Jim has. So, but a lock is a very unique experience. Since we've got a little bit of time, I figure we'll chat about locks. A lock basically is a place on a river or a canal which you pull into, and it has a mechanism to allow the water from the highest level to flow into this space that raises your boat to that level. And then they open the gate and you drive onto that higher level. If you go to the, I think it's the Richelieu Canal up in Montreal, there are 47 locks to take you up to the level of Montreal and then back down again to the level of, I'm not sure what's
Kingston?
below.
Kingston, I think.
Kingston, yeah. Anyway, so all those locks are, you have to run them yourself.
Oh, wow.
It's relatively easy to do, but you got to get off the boat. One person gets off the boat, another person has to stay on the boat, and you always have to have a line wrapped around a bollard, usually a bow, one on the bow, one on the stern, and you're riding up and down the walls inside the lock. So you have these lines that you wrap around, and you keep both ends loose, and one person holds it. And so one person at the bow and one person at the stern. This is what you did as well? Yeah. And then all of a sudden you realize that it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter, so you got to let them slide through your hands because the boat's going down. You know, now you're going down. And once it reaches the bottom, then you just take one of the lines, let it go, and retrieve the line onto your boat. So that's pretty much all you need to worry about, except when you have, 40 or 50 boats in a lock, and they're all trying to stay in their place, and things are drifting, and it's fun. It's always a challenge.
What's Charles River?
You'll read about that in the text.
Charles River is probably only goes up and down maybe about 4 feet, 3
Oh no, more than that. I think. Well, you could.
There's 2 locks in there, right?
You could be right. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
2 locks. Each one could be about 4 feet.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know what the real distance is, but yeah.
We could do that in your boat.
Yeah.
The
a lot of-
Charles. We could do the Charles
Do
River.
the Charles.
Oh, I highly recommend the Charles. It is
It's
so
good.
much fun.
It's cool.
And it's beautiful.
You can go all the way up
Yeah.
to Watertown,
Yeah.
a little beyond Watertown.
Come up to the, to Newton, to that, community boating place,
Well, they have a Newton Yacht Club is right,
right up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, right near there.
but I don't
Yeah.
think you can go beyond Watertown Square.
No, I don't think so.
I think the
There's a-
Watertown, the
there are
bridge
falls
there is.
there, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, it's a good cruise. It's a nice cruise. I had a friend that was over at,
Oh, good.
there's a yacht club on the other side of the river from the Newton Yacht Club. I can't remember.
Is it Watertown?
Watertown.
Is that Watertown Yacht Club? Yeah, he was over in Watertown. We did a couple of cruises with him. That was fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and there's various other subjects that I highly recommend you do. Now, here we go. This will take up a little time.
Oh, the review.
So, I'm gonna let you guys read them.
Vessel trim is the banding on sail edges, fore and aft balance of a boat, physical attitude of the fuel tanks, paint band around the hull.
Attitude.
B?
B.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Fore and aft. It's also the lateral balance, but
Did they change? Did they change? I don't know.
okay, the manufacturer's vessel capacity plate. We really didn't talk about the capacity plate when we saw that boat which was overloaded. But the capacity plate states
That's gonna be
Yeah.
so what you can do with most of these questions is to discount the answers that don't make sense at all.
A.
A looks like a good one, right?
Yeah.
Sailboats don't need it, huh?
Sailboats under,
Under
that was
20 feet.
Under 20 feet, yeah. But you'll find that manufactured capacity plates or manufactured, plates are on most boats built after 19, I think, I should know this too, I'm a vessel safety examiner. I think 97 have a capacity plate or certification plate somewhere on the boat, usually near the helm.
When it
Even
says
kayaks?
No, it says except for sailboats, paddleboats.
it's a capacity, is that for humans or for weight?
It's usually
Weight and number.
weight and capacity, number of people.
Cause remember they.
So if
So
you
it's like a
remember that,
gross vehicle weight rate.
Exactly,
People.
GBWR.
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
if you remember the capacity plate, and I'm sure you don't, but I do, the capacity plate that was, in the slides, it said 8 persons
Yeah, I
with
saw that.
1,200 pounds.
Yep.
So that's almost that's a common plate, and you'll see that in a lot of boats. And usually, it'll be, 15, probably your size boat.
Yeah,
you
we
know,
have
you
one.
Probably have,
Five
have 5.
people, which is really too much.
5 is too many?
Yeah, because
Unless they're
there's no
your size.
place to put them.
That's
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
We've had 5, but just putting around. C.
Yeah. See? Everybody agree?
Yes.
D?
But wouldn't B be using like the trim
Yeah, it
plates?
would be.
Wouldn't B be an option
Repositioning.
if there were trim plates or trim?
What do they mean by repositioning though?
What do they mean by electro hydraulic?
Right.
Like the trim.
From those answers, the only one that really makes sense is D.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to confuse you with big words.
Yeah, that's right, that's what they do. And
Well,
they do the
because,
tests.
but don't those trim plates
Yeah.
that we saw, don't those adjust the trim?
Yeah,
They do.
They're electro-hydraulic. So if you wanted to use them.
But repositioning electro-hydraulic mechanism is what? What is a electro-hydraulic mechanism?
The trim.
Well,
They're not called trim plates, they're just electro-hydraulic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it
They
doesn't
don't call
really,
it that, okay.
it's making you think
That's how
that's
they-
what
that's how
it
they
is.
work.
It's making
The
you
trim
think,
tabs are
because that's a
electro-
description of
Yeah.
how they work, but it's
Okay.
really not,
Right,
it's not the best answer.
Okay.
it's just, it's,
Mm,
this,
B.
the bar exam has all these,
May cause the boat. to-
answers that are close.
Yeah.
One's just closer than all the others.
That's right.
None of them are exact.
That's right.
C.
Yeah, see,
See?
Oh, no, it would,
the bar would go down.
Too far, you're gonna push the.
I would say bow, I would say C.
Is that what
I say
bow
C.
steer means?
Yeah.
Pushing the bow
Oh,
down?
no, it's the other, it's the other.
Stern, what, A?
Yeah.
No.
C.
Trimming the engine too far, like too far at,
So
No,
here's the transom.
Too far in.
The bar
oh,
goes
too
down.
far in.
Yeah, yeah.
The bar goes
Yeah,
down.
that would take on water
Push
over the
your-
stern.
Really? C.
Push your bow down.
The bar would go down.
C.
See?
Let's do
Oh,
I think it's C.
I think it's C.
C.
It's C.
Yeah.
I'll say C.
C. Oh, if the boat is turned
That's like,
in.
this is your, well,
Right.
in too far, here's the transom and it's turned
yeah,
in.
the motor is pushing,
In.
Yes,
Pushing the
got
bow-
it.
pushing
got
the
it.
bow
Yep,
down,
Got it.
It would,
got
it would have a tendency to have the bow steer and perhaps have water come over the bow.
Yeah.
A is a tricky one because it's almost the same thing, but
Yeah.
there's more
Stern.
Right.
information with C.
Almost the same as what?
the right answer, but it wasn't enough.
Hmm.
I would say C again.
This is not a tricky one.
No.
Remember we talked about porpoising when
It'd be B.
Planing, when planing, so it would be C.
we're talking about
It would be C.
trimming out too far?
Yeah, see.
C. Yeah. Because what it would do is it push the bow up when you trim out too far. And that causes the boat to porpoise along like
Proper trimming,
Say B.
Yeah, I'd say
B, actually.
C.
Oh, C, yeah, that's it.
that. C?
Yeah.
Oh,
it could
of
be
course,
D,
B.
if you ask me.
Of course.
I had B right away.
Yeah, yeah.
Planing
Of course.
is
But they convinced you.
Yeah.
Leo.
For sure.
That's what I'm worried about tomorrow.
May result in increased, yeah, C.
Are you taking the test tomorrow?
When it's
Different course.
proper,
Different course.
when things are running proper,
Proper.
you want to have the reduced,
Right.
reduced fuel consumption.
Yeah.
We talked about that.
Decrease.
It would,
Right.
when on a plane,
Oh.
It's tricky, the way they did it.
I know,
It's
I
just-
know, that's what they designed, they design
Exactly.
these things to trick you.
Ambiguous.
Exactly.
So what they're doing is they're really challenging you to really know your material.
Yes.
That's what it's all about.
C.
C. Not a C.
What do you think?
You can operate
Well,
one at a time, independently.
C is the only right one.
Right. C.
I can't remember about upward or downward with the trim tabs.
If it's up, it has no effect. If it's down, it affects that side of the boat. If both are down, then it would affect the bow and stern. One down would affect
Right,
lateral.
lateral, but if they're both down, will it plane better?
No, the hull is designed to plane by itself.
Okay,
So if they were both up, it would plane the best way.
okay,
So if you need to drop your bow, you put them down a little bit, or if you don't need to drop the bow, or if you need to
On one side.
bring one side up or down, you could.
Use
Like
one.
if you had a
Change
load
that.
of fish on one side.
That's right.
Yeah.
Lots of fish.
Yeah, you wanna,
wait, one more question.
Yeah.
What's the other thing, what's the other adjustment besides lateral? Is it horizontal? Is it
Well, it's
Is
bow and
one aft.
stern.
bow and
Fore
stern?
and
Okay.
aft, yeah.
Yeah, after. Stabilizers.
That's
D.
easy.
Well, I've got a, well,
You don't think it's easy?
D.
Well, does it reduce rolling
Yeah,
rate?
does it?
Well, they're not fuel additives. They're not special handholds. And they're not navigation gyro stabilized
Yes.
compasses.
Right.
D.
It's gotta be D.
it's gotta be D, but I've got a problem with the answer. I don't like, one, I don't like it to the side of the hull.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's really off the transom,
Right.
which is part of the hull, I guess,
The back.
but it's not the side. It's,
We have to be
In my
inside the
mind.
boat lines,
I know.
you know,
And is it
Right,
rolling
sir.
action or
Well, it
Or
is,
bounds him
it
up?
affects rolling, it can affect rolling as well.
Okay.
But it's kind of an obscure question, but it's the only one that makes sense.
It's the
out of those
most
four.
right.
It's
out
the
of
most
those.
right.
Yeah.
There you
It's
go.
the one that's
Yeah,
more right.
fetch is.
Oh, yeah.
B.
B,
B,
the distance of the.
it is. That's that unobstructed distance that the wind flows across the water.
A.
Well,
C.
it
C.
depends. If heavy seas, it would be, I
Yeah,
don't think
you-
it's C.
C.
It just says head seas, it doesn't say heavy.
C.
Good. Kinda
I
emphasize
like
body.
D though.
I know, right?
D would
Let's
be
see.
nice.
I think
That's
that would
what
be
you
fun.
do.
Bring the water speed for that one.
D would be a
Yeah,
fun
it is C,
answer.
45-degree angle.
Yes.
'Cause that's
We're
used-
assuming that most of us are not out in heavy waves, you know,
Mhm.
hopefully. Let's pray we're
Alright, so
not.
add an angle.
So,
Mm.
D, I would
D.
think.
Yeah, D.
D, you're right.
D.
I would say A, you had to do it, but
A.
Well, you have to occasionally. You have to,
A
Yeah.
is-
yeah, so it would be A.
It's like watching.
As I said, if there's a
You gotta
danger
change
of
the
broaching,
choice.
that's what you wanna do. You wanna turn around and reverse your
And
course.
go, yeah, so it doesn't whack you over.
The right, the right
You
number.
wanna avoid
letter
that,
for
we
me
wanna
is
avoid the
D.
video that we
Yeah, I
showed.
know.
Yes.
I don't even wanna be inside.
Yeah, it's A. So you need to plan when to do it
Mhm.
and then execute it exactly when is the right time. So it takes a little forethought, it takes a little control, and a lot of worry. Because you're really not sure what's gonna happen once your boat gets turned around.
Yeah, cause you have to
You're,
go back in.
you're facing a whole new world now.
like C is a good
Yeah,
idea,
C
regardless.
is it.
C.
Yeah.
C.
Yeah. It's C.
B.
Sounds like B.
Yeah,
B.
I'd say B.
B.
Sounds pretty confusing.
Very difficult. Sometimes, you know, I was following some lights on shore and I said, those lights look weird. And then all of a sudden, they turned and drove away. And I said, I'm going in the wrong direction. So, you know, those things happen. The key thing is that all the aids to navigation, which I really didn't talk too much about on the rules of the road and stuff, but do they get a lot of aids to navigation? Buoys and stuff like that. Anyway, they all have characteristics that you need to be aware of. You'll have a flashing 3-second over here, which means it flashes once every 3 seconds. And you'll have a fast flashing over here, and you'll have so you look around, you look at characteristics, then you have to look at your chart. And you'll see those characteristics on the buoy emblems or symbols on your chart and say, oh, if that's flashing over there and that's flashing over there, oh, I must be here on the chart. So then you figure out your orientation and then you know which direction to go off in. Unless you got a GPS and then you kind of trust the GPS.
It is B.
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 Yep. Slow down. You always want to be able to stop in half your visibility, whatever you can see. And I've
Or here.
or here, which can be scary because
You hear that
I
wave
was in-
crashing on something, you really wanna stop.
I cruised to Nova Scotia and we were in fog in the Bay of Fundy, and the fog was so thick that I could not see the inside bulkhead in the inner cabin.
Whoa.
I could not see the bow of the boat at all. I could not, well, I could barely see the mast on the boat, but when looking into the cabin, I couldn't see the bulkhead inside the cabin, which was scary. And you could hear boats all the time. I mean, this machinery would go by you, and you just pray, you know.
You were sure you were hitting on one too.
Yeah, we had a horn going all the time, but a lot of boats out there, they go by you and they didn't blow any horns at all. So you got to be careful.
Wow.
And hopefully they had radar. I did not have radar at the time. I have radar now, but I didn't have radar at the time, and that was before the year of GPS. So the only thing I had was Loran, so I knew where I was, but I was praying that they knew where I was too. Anyway, this you will only get out of the reading in the text, but I'll let you give a guess.
A.
C.
Greatest number.
A?
A. So,
A.
Yeah, 'cause they get,
Is it?
yeah, A.
they get a lot of thunderstorms down
Yeah, it is A.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah, the southern states have, the coast, along the coast of the southern states have more thunderstorms than anywhere in the east coast.
Wow.
Yeah, it rains a lot.
Yep.
There's short bursts of rain down there.
Yep.
We're lucky.
One of my trips to Bermuda, we went through 11 thunderstorms in one day.
Wow.
11 different ones. You could see them marching right across the sky, and they came right at us. It was, and one of them produced a water spout, which I have a picture of at home, which was really scary and gave me nightmares that night. But anyway, we won't discuss that.
You're not in Kansas anymore, Joe.
We're not.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Really move fast when
Okay,
I would
severe
say-
squalls.
That would be D, wouldn't it?
No clue.
D is correct, yeah. It's in the front of, or just ahead of a frontal system.
So we had, like snow squalls that would come and create whiteout conditions on
Yep.
the highway.
Yep.
Which is, talk about having no, depth perception. It's like being in the fog. I
Right.
don't know if you've driven in a whiteout, but
Oh, yeah.
there's nothing you can see.
Right. And the key thing with that is to
80,000
have driving
pounds.
lights which are low, and you shut off your headlights, because the headlights will blind you.
Yeah.
The reflection of your headlights off the snow.
Yep.
But if you have driving lights that are lower than, at the bottom of the car,
Hmm.
that's the best place to have.
That's the same thing with the spotlight on your boat in the
Yeah.
fog, it
Right.
defeats the purpose.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely, yeah.
Someone else might see it, but it doesn't do you any good.
Yeah, they probably won't see it either, because it gets deflected in the fog, and it just basically disperses.
Mm.
So that they will see something glow, but they won't know where it's coming from, so.
That's not that.
Again, this is from the reading that does anyone know what a jackline is?
No.
Does everyone know what a jackline is?
No.
Okay, when you're cruising offshore, and I've done a little bit of that, you're always wearing a harness. You are always tied to the boat. So you have a harness and you have a tether. Tether's got a clasp on the end, and it's always hooked onto something. Or you wrap the tether around and clip the clasp to itself. Okay? And that way you're always attached to the boat. So if you get swamped or a wave comes and washes you overboard, you're in the water, but you're still attached to the boat. So everyone wears a harness when they're on deck. Period.
So, that said, which is the correct answer there?
B.
Well, let me just describe what a jackline is. A jackline is a place that's rigged on the boat, usually a rope or a cable that runs from the bow of the boat to the stern of the boat, that you can clasp your tether on and then you can walk forward to change sails, or to drop anchor, or do whatever you have to do.
Yeah.
And still stay fastened to the boat.
So that would be B.
The military plane, when they got a parachute down.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
Attached to the line.
Right, same,
Yeah,
similar
C.
thing, yeah.
Stern tie down, yeah,
From the
got
bow
it,
to
C.
the stern,
So it would be C.
okay.
So that's
So-
your zip line.
It's like a zip line, yeah. So I always rig one whenever we went offshore.
I have a little bracelet that attaches to my motor,
Oh, that's a shut-off, emergency shut-off,
Yeah.
yeah.
so if I
That's,
go overboard, it
that shuts the motor down.
shuts the motor down.
Why is that important?
Because then the boat won't come around and hit me.
It
The
won't
propeller
run off by
stops
itself.
spinning
Stops the
the
propeller.
propeller, so you
That's more important. The boat, the boat can still drift off, but the prop won't hit you. Hopefully. But again, by the time you've disconnected that and you're in the air on your way off the boat, the prop's probably still going around. But if you happen to come down on it, you'll stop it. That's what's really important. Again, this is from the reading, but one answer does make more sense than the rest.
A,
I would say
B.
D.
B, the B.
glowing cables.
B is just on the.
B, B.
B. It's under
Makes
the
sense?
surface.
Yeah.
it's
Makes
sitting on
total
the surface.
sense.
So one of the rules, one of the things you always want to be aware of is never pass between a tug and its tow. Because the cable is probably just under the surface of the water and it looks nice and clear, and you go under there and you'll hit that cable.
Mhm.
And trust me, the tugboat driver will not be happy. And neither will you.
Neither will your boat.
B.
B.
B is the obvious answer, but you gotta read it again and see if it makes sense.
Hmm.
B, I mean A.
Yeah, I would say A.
A. B is not correct. I mean, why would they have a security zone of
Around
200,
vessels.
200 and 1,000 yards? Doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. You'll get that from the reading of the text. That's the only place you can get
Okay.
it. So.
Yeah, I would say A.
This again is another confusing answer.
Carried or towed.
A.
Wait, what's the word tender mean?
A tender is
Takes you
a,
to land,
it's a,
yeah.
that's a boat to ferry people from the
Yeah.
large boat to the shore
Shore.
and back again.
Yeah.
So A?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's A. So you could, a lot of them, should never be towed by a recreational vessel, no. I mean, we do that all the
They're
time.
always towed by
So, should never be used for exploring the shorelines of the harbors, that's what we use them for.
Right.
Many bodies.
But the last one can be towed in both calm and rough seas.
It's true.
Yeah.
Well,
But read the question. Talks about
Dinghies,
dinghies carried or towed.
Yeah.
Or towed And then D has toad in the answer, so it couldn't be,
Yeah.
because it would
It
make sense.
only has the toad.
I know.
Well, they, yeah, I
It's
mean,
just
the
weird. that's
A
all.
is more right.
A is more right, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Like
D.
D.
Everybody jump on D?
I'm not fast enough, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. And they need to be repacked annually. And there's a date sticker right on every package or every valise. And,
Like like a fire extinguisher.
right.
Yeah, needs to be,
And he's the
Maintained.
vessel safety examiner.
Now, this is one thing we didn't get into.
Hmm.
You can figure it out if you're good in geometry.
steer to the farthest mark.
I guess C.
Check your compass and stay on course. Yeah, they talked about that, but
Right.
it's not the answer.
In the very beginning, they talked
Go
about
to line
the
number.
text, that's all I read.
I know. Well, they were running a range using two buoys, and they were running away
But
from
they
them.
don't line up.
They said, use your compass as
They
a way to
don't line up.
do that.
Here are the two.
But if
Here
you,
are the two,
if you think
right?
about you're on a boat, and here are the ranges, and you're right on course, and now all of a sudden you notice that you're not on course. Which way do you want to move your boat?
Toward the farthest.
That's what I would say,
This
towards
way?
the farthest.
So what's gonna happen? You are now doing this. Gets farther away.
Go to the closer one?
You steer toward the closer one, it's gonna bring it like that.
Is it?
Oh, that's the answer.
I'll have to check that out next time I'm out on the high seas.
There you go. So basically what you wanna do is you will steer to the closest mark, and that will turn you back on course. This is got too many things. You're trying to hold position while waiting for your turn at the dock. This is a common sense question.
It's not D.
C.
C, yeah.
B.
Yeah, I would say B too.
Everybody says B. Good.
D.
Yes,
Yeah, D.
because that's,
Opposite directions.
yeah.
And always cause you lots of trouble.
That can cause standing waves.
Yeah, the same, yeah, similar.
Anti-transit.
This again, this is one of which is the better of.
Oh my gosh,
Slack water probably.
it's not C. A.
Right.
Very little current.
Yeah. Slack water. We didn't talk about slack water, but
No.
slack water is when there's no current running. That would be mid-tide. So during mid-tide of the ocean, there's no water running in the inlet. So the water's
So-
just sitting still.
3
That's-
hours after high and 3 hours before low, like
Right.
that?
So mid-tide, in most cases, if you have an Eldridge tide table, it should tell you when the currents are running in which direction, and when it's slack. There's usually there's only 1 second when it's slack, but a little bit on one side, a little bit on the other side, it's the best way to transit an inlet. And that's the end.
Oh, do you? Thank you.
Oh, sorry I ran over.
Well, that's
There was
all
just a
right.
lot of review questions.
Excellent,
Great
excellent.
class.
That's a very tough class.